The sun burned the Wyoming prairie like a curse. May Hollister hung upside down from a wooden beam, her wrists tied raw, her face swollen and streaked with blood. Flies buzzed around the corners of her cracked lips. Her hair clung to her cheeks, matted with sweat and dirt. The rope dug into her ankles, sending waves of agony through her body with each slight movement. A lone vulture perched atop the abandoned stable, its patient eyes fixed on her with terrible certainty. The bird's shadow stretched across the warped wooden planks, a grim timekeeper counting down her final hours. May could barely breathe. Her throat rasped with every exhale, and her heartbeat thudded like a drum inside her skull. The sky spun in endless circles. The air tasted like dust and iron. 2 hours under the blazing sun, and her mind began to slip. She thought of her sister Abigail's laughter, then of Vernon's fists, then nothing at all. In moments of clarity, fragmented images flashed through her mind. A woman's smile, a charred Bible page, a handwritten letter. But the heat and pain kept pulling her back into darkness. A dry whisper escaped her, barely a breath. "Let me go." The sound carried faint but desperate across the empty grassland. From a distance, a horse stopped. A man turned his head, narrowing his eyes against the glare. His name was Jedediah Lawson, but most called him Jed. Old enough to have seen too many graves and too many storms, he had been marking the boundary of his Whispering Pines ranch when something, instinct or providence, made him pause. The vulture suddenly took flight, wings spread far and wide against the harsh, blue squinting. Jed's hand moved to the colt on his hip, eyes tracking the bird back to its perch. That's when he saw her. He sprinted toward the stable, boots pounding over cracked earth, dust rising behind him. When he reached the doorway, he froze for half a second. The woman hung like a slaughtered animal, dying in the heat. Jed's knife flashed twice, slicing through the ropes, catching her before she hit the ground. The blood rushed down her arms like fire. May gasped, eyes rolling open to meet his. They were gray eyes, weathered but steady. For the first time in forever, someone looked at her and didn't turn away. Her lips trembled. "Justice, the word tore out like a plea, half pain, half fury. As he cradled her, Jed noticed the brand on her shoulder. The letter P burned into her flesh, the mark of punishment for betrayal. He'd seen it before during the war. "Hold on," he muttered, voice low as he carried her to his horse. "I've got you." May tried to speak, but her tongue was too dry. Her world blurred into flashes of sky and dust in the shadow of a man who didn't walk away. Somewhere in that haze, a question began to rise. Who was this stranger brave enough to stop for her? And what would he do when he found out who she really was? 2 days earlier, May had slipped into Vernon Pike's office while he was out inspecting cattle with his foreman. Her husband's sprawling ranch house felt like a prison, but she'd learned to move through it silently, like a ghost. She'd been searching for evidence of his dealings with the notorious Blake Brothers gang. Vernon had been unusually flush with cash lately, buying new breeding stock and hiring more hands. The small pouch of gold dust she had discovered hidden behind his ledger last month suggested the money wasn't from cattle. May's trembling fingers rifled through the top drawer of his desk, finding nothing but business correspondence and receipts. She moved to the bottom drawer, jimmying the lock with a hairpin as she'd practiced for weeks. Inside lay a leather-bound ledger. She flipped it open, scanning the columns of numbers. Most were legitimate ranch expenses, but on the final pages she found what she was looking for: payments to BB, followed by notes about train shipments and routes. Evidence that Vernon was laundering money for train robbers. May was about to close the drawer when a folded letter caught her eye. The handwriting on the outside was unmistakable. Abigail's careful, slanted script. Her heart hammered as she unfolded the paper with shaking hands. "Dearest May, I pray this finds its way to you. I've found refuge with Father Michael in Silver Creek. He's given me work at the church and doesn't ask questions. The mark Vernon left on my face has healed, though I'll carry the scar forever. I've been gathering information that might free you. There are rumors about Vernon's business with the Blake brothers. If you can escape, come to me. Father Michael says his door is always open to those seeking sanctuary. Stay strong, little sister. I haven't forgotten my promise." With all my love, Abigail. Tears welled in May's eyes. 6 months had passed since Abigail fled after Vernon had beaten her for interfering when he'd taken his belt to May. She'd believed her sister might be dead. Vernon had said as much, taunting her with stories of what happened to women alone on the frontier. Well, now, ain't this interesting? May froze. Vernon stood in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the light. He wasn't supposed to be back for hours. Behind him loomed Silas, his cold-eyed foreman. Found yourself some reading material, wife? Vernon's voice was silk over steel as he stepped into the room. And here I thought you were busy with your womanly duties. May clutched the letter to her chest. Abigail's alive. Course she is. Whores usually survive. Vernon's hand shot out, snatching the letter. His eyes narrowed as he scanned it. Silver Creek, huh? And Father Michael, isn't that interesting? She's at a church. She's found sanctuary. May's voice shook. Vernon folded the letter deliberately, tucking it into his vest pocket. No sanctuary from me, darling. Not for her. Not for you. His gaze fell to the open ledger. Now what else have you been snooping into? May stepped backward until she hit the wall. Nothing, I just wanted... The first blow caught her across the cheekbone, snapping her head to the side. The second doubled her over, driving the air from her lungs. Phyllis, Vernon said calmly as May slid to the floor. I believe my wife needs a lesson in loyalty. Take her to the old McClintock stable. Use the rope. He knelt beside May, grabbing her chin. Maybe a day or two in the sun will teach you to mind your place. May spat blood onto his polished boots. Vernon smiled, wiping her chin with his handkerchief. Always had spirit. It's why I married you. He stood, straightening his vest. Shame you never learned when to break. Silas and Quinn, Vernon's other hired man, dragged her outside. The last thing May remembered before the beating began was the sight of Vernon mounting his horse, the letter with Abigail's location safely tucked in his pocket. May regained consciousness as Jed carried her into a small cabin nestled against a grove of cottonwoods. Pain radiated through her body with each step he took. The cabin was simple but neat, a single room with a bed, stove, table, and chair. A well-worn Bible lay beside a shaving kit on the table. Jed lowered her gently onto the bed. Stay still, he said, moving to the stove where a pot of water already simmered. Got to clean those wounds. May's instinct was to flee, but her body refused to cooperate. She watched through swollen eyes as Jed soaked a cloth in warm water. He moved with practiced efficiency, like a man who'd tended wounds before. Who? Her voice cracked. Who are you? Name's Jedediah Lawson. Most call me Jed. He wrung out the cloth. This is going to hurt. Try not to move. The warm cloth touched her forehead, and May flinched. Jed worked methodically, washing away dirt and blood with gentle precision. Army surgeon? She managed to ask, noting his technique. A flicker of surprise crossed his weathered face. Field medic, 12th Pennsylvania, Gettysburg, Antietam, Cold Harbor. May studied him as he worked. Mid-40s, broad-shouldered, with streaks of gray in his dark hair and beard. Deep lines etched around his eyes spoke of hard years. A long scar ran from his left ear down his neck, disappearing beneath his collar. Why help me? She whispered. Jed paused, wetting the cloth again. Found a woman dying. Didn't need more reason than that. He resumed cleaning a cut on her cheek. Got a name? May Hollister. She winced as he found a particularly tender spot. At least that's what I was born as. Pike's wife. It wasn't a question. Jed's expression hardened. Recognized the brand, his signature. May's hand moved instinctively to her shoulder, where the P had been burned into her flesh. You know Vernon? Know of him. Man who marks his property don't usually stop at cattle. Jed finished cleaning her face and moved to her raw wrists. What did you do to earn this? May hesitated, then decided truth was her only currency. Found evidence he's working with the Blake brothers, laundering money for train robberies. She swallowed painfully. And I found a letter from my sister. She got away 6 months ago. He's been telling me she was dead. Jed's hand stilled for a moment. Blake brothers. The name seemed to weigh on him. Where's your sister now? Silver Creek, working at a church. May's eyes filled with tears. Vernon found the letter. He knows where she is. Jed nodded slowly, resuming his ministrations. That explains the rush to punish you. Man like that doesn't like loose ends. He wrapped her wrists carefully with clean strips of cloth. You need water. Food too, but water first. He helped her sit up just enough to sip from a tin cup. The water was cool and tasted sweeter than anything May had known. She drank greedily until Jed pulled the cup away. Slow. Too much at once will make you sick. As the sun began to set, golden light streamed through the cabin's single window. Jed lit a lantern and prepared a simple meal. Beans and salted venison warmed on the stove. The familiar domestic sounds brought an unexpected lump to May's throat. How long had it been since she'd felt safe? Eat what you can, Jed said, setting a plate beside her. Rest will help more than food right now. May managed a few bites before exhaustion overtook her. As her eyes drifted closed, she saw Jed settle into the chair, his Colt resting across his lap, gaze fixed on the door. He'll come looking, she murmured. I expect so. Jed's voice was calm. Sleep. Tomorrow's soon enough to worry. Morning light filtered through the window when May woke. Every muscle protested as she tried to sit up. Jed was already awake, tending a small fire in the stove. The smell of coffee filled the cabin. Morning, he said, glancing her way. How bad? I've been better, May admitted, but I've been worse too. Jed nodded, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. He brought one to her, helping her sit against the wall. Figured you for a fighter. May cradled the cup in bandaged hands. My sister and I grew up on a small farm in Kansas. Parents died of cholera when I was 15, Abigail 18. We managed on our own for 2 years until drought took everything. She sipped the bitter coffee. Vernon came through with his cattle, offered marriage, security, said he'd hire Abigail too. But it wasn't security he had in mind. No. May stared into her cup. First beating came 2 days after the wedding. Said I'd overcooked the meat. After that, there was always a reason. Jed sat on the edge of the chair, his eyes on the window. Why'd he mark you? May's finger traced the outline of the brand through her torn dress. Vernon marks what belongs to him. Says a man's property should bear his sign. She looked up. Abigail tried to stop him once. That's when he beat her so badly she ran. Left me a note saying she'd find help, come back for me. And she wrote again, to the house. May nodded, must have thought Vernon wouldn't see it. She's working for a Father Michael in Silver Creek. A shadow crossed Jed's face. Father Michael, he repeated softly. What else did the letter say? That she was gathering evidence about Vernon's dealings with the Blake brothers. That this Father Michael offered sanctuary. May studied Jed's expression. You know something about him? Jed set down his cup. Let's just say I've heard stories that don't match with a man of God. He stood, checking his gun before sliding it into his holster. We need to leave. If Vernon found where your sister is, she's in danger. We? May's voice caught. You'd help me find her? Jed's expression was unreadable. Silver Creek's 2 days' ride if we push. Can you sit a horse? May swung her legs over the edge of the bed, testing her strength. Pain shot through her body, but determination pushed it aside. I'll manage. Jed packed efficiently, food, ammunition, bandages, in a spare shirt that would swallow May whole but offer better protection than her torn dress. He helped her change behind a blanket strung across the corner, preserving what dignity remained to her. As they prepared to leave, May noticed Jed slip an old pocket watch into his vest. She caught a glimpse of a photograph inside, a woman and a small girl. Your family? She asked quietly. Jed snapped the watch closed. Once, long time ago. His tone discouraged further questions. Outside, he helped her onto his dun gelding, then swung up behind her. As they rode away from the cabin, May felt Vernon's invisible grip loosen just a fraction. For the first time in years, she was moving away from him instead of cowering before his return. They hadn't gone half a mile when the sound of approaching horses reached them. Jed reined in, his body tensing. 3 riders crested the hill ahead. Vernon flanked by Silas and Quinn. Well now, Vernon called, his voice carrying easily in the morning air. Isn't this cozy? Jed's hand moved to his gun. That's far enough, Pike. Vernon ignored him, eyes fixed on May. Didn't expect to find you breathing, wife. Though I suppose I should thank this good Samaritan for saving me the trouble of burying you. Let us pass, Jed said. The lady's not going back with you. Vernon finally looked at Jed, really looked, and a flicker of recognition crossed his face. Well, I'll be damned. Sergeant Lawson? The hero of Antietam? His laugh held genuine surprise. Boys, we're in the presence of a genuine war hero. Or should I say, former hero. Jed's body went rigid. You know me. Samuel Vernon, the rancher said with a mock bow. Though I go by my mother's maiden name these days. Served under you in the 12th. Not that you'd recognize me. I was just another face in the ranks before I got wise. May felt Jed's breath catch. Samuel Vernon died at Antietam. Did I now? Vernon's smile widened. That's the official story, ain't it? Samuel Vernon, killed while bravely defending his position. Very convenient for a man looking to start fresh. He straightened in his saddle. You look surprised, Sergeant. Didn't expect to see a ghost? You deserted, Jed said flatly. You were supposed to hold the line at the cornfield. You ran. 23 men died because of you. Vernon shrugged. War's a messy business. Some live, some die. I chose living. You chose betrayal. Jed's voice had turned to ice. You sold information to Confederate scouts, told them exactly where to hit us. And they paid well for it too. Vernon glanced at May. Your rescuer has quite the history, wife. Took the blame for my actions. Court-martial, disgrace, would have been a firing squad if he hadn't escaped. He turned back to Jed. How does it feel, Sergeant, knowing you've been hiding all these years while I built myself an empire? May's mind reeled. The man who had saved her and the man who had tortured her were bound by a past deeper than she could have imagined. Enough talk, Vernon said, his amusement fading. My wife comes with me. You can ride away, Lawson, for old time's sake. Jed's arm tightened around May. She's not property. The brand says different. Vernon nodded to Silas and Quinn. Take her. Kill him. What happened next unfolded with startling speed. Jed's horse reared as he drew his Colt, firing in one smooth motion. Quinn's hat flew off as the bullet grazed his scalp. Silas drew, but Jed was already spurring the horse into a gallop, heading for the cover of a nearby ravine. Shots rang out behind them. May clung to the saddle horn as Jed pushed the horse to its limits, weaving between rocks and scrub brush. The sound of pursuit faded as they plunged deeper into the ravine. Vernon will have men watching the main trails, Jed said when they finally slowed. We'll need to take the long way around. May twisted to look at him. You knew him. In the war. Jed's jaw tightened. I knew a coward named Samuel Vernon who got good men killed. Never thought I'd see him again. You were court-martialed for what he did? Story for another time. Jed guided the horse up a narrow game trail. Right now, we need to focus on staying alive and finding your sister. May faced forward again, questions burning in her mind. She'd been married to Vernon for 3 years, but knew nothing about his past before Kansas. Now she wondered what other secrets lay beneath his charming facade. As they climbed out of the ravine, the vast Wyoming landscape spread before them, rolling hills, distant mountains, an endless sky. For the first time since her wedding day, May was traveling beyond the boundaries of Vernon's ranch. Despite the pain and danger, she felt something unexpected stirring in her chest. Hope. They made camp that night in a sheltered box canyon with a small spring providing fresh water. Jed built a fire small enough to provide warmth without sending visible smoke into the darkening sky. May sat wrapped in a blanket, watching him move with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to living rough. How bad was it? She finally asked. After Vernon deserted. Jed's hands paused briefly as he arranged coffee and hardtack for their meager supper. Bad enough. We were flanked where we shouldn't have been. Men died confused, thinking they were in a secure position. He poured water into the coffee pot. I was senior non-com, my responsibility. But it wasn't your fault. Tell that to the dead. Jed set the pot on the fire. After, when we pieced it together, it was clear someone had leaked our positions. Evidence pointed to me, maps in my footlocker, money I couldn't explain. Vernon planted it, Jed nodded. By then he was officially counted among the dead. Perfect cover. He stared into the flames. Court-martial found me guilty of treason. Night before the sentence was to be carried out, the guard looking over me turned out to be an old friend. Looked the other way long enough for me to slip away. You've been running ever since. For a time, then just existing. He poured coffee into a cup and handed it to her. War changes a man. Betrayal changes him more. May wrapped her fingers around the warm cup. Is that why you helped me? Because you saw another of Vernon's victims? Jed considered her question. Maybe at first. Mostly I saw someone who needed help and had no one else to turn to. He sipped his own coffee. Been on both sides of that. The night deepened around them, stars appearing in a vast canopy overhead. May found herself studying Jed's face in the firelight, the lines of hardship, the quiet dignity, the eyes that had seen too much but hadn't turned cruel. What will you do after we find Abigail? She asked. Haven't thought that far ahead. Jed prodded the fire with a stick. One day at a time's been my way for years now. Vernon knows you're alive. He'll come after you. Let him try. Jed's voice held no bravado, just simple acceptance. Man's been living on borrowed time since Antietam. They sat in silence for a while, the crackle of the fire and the soft nickering of the horse the only sounds. May felt oddly at peace despite everything. The pain in her body, the danger pursuing them, the uncertainty ahead. Something about Jed's steady presence made the night less frightening. We should sleep, he said eventually. Long ride tomorrow. I'll take first watch. May nodded, settling onto her side, the blanket pulled tight around her. Wake me for second. Jed's soft chuckle was the last thing she heard before exhaustion claimed her. The dream came as it always did, Vernon's face twisted in rage, his hands around her throat, her lungs burning for air. May woke with a strangled gasp, sitting bolt upright. Easy, Jed's voice came from nearby. You're safe. May's heart hammered in her chest as reality reasserted itself. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows. Jed sat with his back against a rock, rifle across his knees. Sorry, she whispered. Bad dreams. No need to apologize. Jed offered his canteen. Dreams are just the mind's way of working through things we can't face awake. May took a long drink. Sounds like the voice of experience. Had my share of night terrors after the war. Still do, sometimes. He took the canteen back. They fade, not completely, but enough. How long were you married? May asked, nodding toward the pocket where his watch was kept. Jed's expression softened. 8 years. Sarah was the preacher's daughter, but back in Pennsylvania. Too good for the likes of me, but she didn't seem to notice. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Our girl Emma had just turned 6 when I left for the war. What happened to them? The smile vanished. Fever took Sarah while I was away. Emma. When he didn't continue, May said quietly, the Blake brothers. Jed's eyes snapped to hers. How did you know? The way you reacted when I mentioned them, like it was personal. May pulled her knees to her chest. I'm right, aren't I? Jed was silent for so long, May thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, after the war, after I escaped, I drifted west, became a bounty hunter, was good at tracking, good with a gun, made a name for myself bringing in wanted men. He stared into the darkness beyond the firelight. Blake brothers had a price on their heads. I tracked them for months, nearly had them cornered in Colorado. They got away? Worse, they found out who I was, where my daughter was living with her grandparents. Jed's voice turned hollow. Burned the house with everyone inside. Left a note saying it was payment for my persistence. May's hand went to her mouth. God, Jed, I'm so sorry. Been 3 years now. Jed looked down at his hands. Gave up bounty hunting after that. Bought land here, kept to myself. Thought maybe I could outrun the past. His laugh held no humor. Seems the past had other ideas. Vernon working with the men who killed your family. It can't be coincidence we've crossed paths. I stopped believing in coincidence a long time ago. Jed checked his rifle's action. Get some sleep, May. Dawn comes early. May lay back down, but sleep was elusive now. She watched Jed's silhouette against the star-filled sky, wondering at the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. Two broken people, each carrying wounds visible and invisible, now bound by common enemies and shared danger. Eventually, exhaustion won over reflection, and May drifted into a dreamless sleep. They set out at first light, pushing harder now that May had regained some strength. Jed led them through winding game trails and narrow passes, avoiding the main routes where Vernon's men might be watching. The day grew hot as they crossed a vast expanse of prairie. May's body ached from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle, but she didn't complain. Every mile put distance between her and Vernon, bringing her closer to Abigail. "Tell me about your sister," Jed said during a brief stop to rest the horse. May smiled, the first genuine smile since her rescue. "Abigail's the strong one, always has been. After our parents died, she kept the farm going, kept food on the table, taught school for a while too." Her expression clouded. She never trusted Vernon, even at the beginning. Said his eyes were too calculating. Smart woman. "She stayed because of me, said we had to stick together." May's voice dropped. "The night she left, Vernon had been drinking heavily. I'd burnt the bread at supper, and he started in with his belt. Abigail tried to intervene, and he turned on her instead." She closed her eyes briefly. "I've never seen him so violent. Thought he might kill her. When he finally passed out, she was barely conscious. I helped her pack a few things, gave her what money I'd managed to hide away." "Why didn't you go with her?" May's laugh was bitter. "Vernon kept the horses locked up at night. There was only one, and it couldn't carry us both fast enough." She looked away. "Abigail wanted to stay, said we'd find another way. I made her go. Told her to find help, that I'd be all right until then." "And she believed you?" "No, but she knew I was right about the horse." May straightened her shoulders. "The next morning, Vernon discovered she was gone. That's when he gave me this." Her hand touched the brand beneath her clothing. "Said if I ever thought of running, I should remember that I was his property, marked and paid for." Jed's jaw tightened. Man like that doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as decent folk. They continued riding through the afternoon, making better time than expected. By evening, they'd reached a small creek where Jed suggested they camp for the night. "Silver Creek's half a day's ride from here," he said, dismounting. "We'll reach it by noon tomorrow." May slid from the horse, legs buckling slightly as they hit the ground. Jed caught her elbow, steadying her. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a moment of recognition, of shared understanding. Then Jed released her arm and turned to unsaddle the horse. As twilight deepened into night, they sat beside another small fire. The soft gurgle of the creek provided a gentle counterpoint to the crackling flames. May found herself studying Jed's profile as he stared into the fire. "What will you do?" she asked. "After we find Abigail?" Jed considered the question. "Thought I might pay a visit to the Blake brothers. Settle an old debt. Alone? That would be suicide." "Maybe." He poked the fire with his stick. "Been living on borrowed time anyway." May leaned forward. "There's got to be another way. If Abigail has evidence against Vernon, maybe we could take it to the authorities." Jed's laugh was short and harsh. "What authorities? Marshall and Silver Creek is in Blake's pocket. County sheriff won't cross a man with Vernon's money and connections. Then we find someone who will. Federal marshals, maybe. Long odds. Better than certain death." May's voice grew earnest. "Jed, I can't let you throw your life away. Not after everything you've done for me." He looked at her, really looked, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Been a long time since anyone cared whether I lived or died." "Well, I do." The words came out fiercer than May intended. "You saved my life. I won't stand by and watch you sacrifice yours." Something shifted in Jed's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or the recognition of a truth he'd kept buried. He looked away first. "Let's find your sister. Then we'll figure out the rest." They ate a simple meal of jerky and hardtack before settling in for the night. This time, May insisted on taking a watch. Jed reluctantly agreed, handing her his spare pistol. "Wake me at midnight," he said, "and don't hesitate to shoot anything that moves." May nodded, checking the gun's action the way he'd shown her earlier that day. As Jed stretched out by the fire, she took up position against a large rock with a clear view of their surroundings. The night was peaceful, the creek's whisper a soothing counterpoint to the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of nocturnal creatures. Above, stars crowded the sky in numbers May had never seen from inside Vernon's house, where she'd rarely been allowed outdoors after dark. Her thoughts drifted to Abigail. Was her sister truly safe? Or had Vernon already reached Silver Creek? The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the night air. And what of this Father Michael that Abigail had mentioned? Jed clearly had doubts about him. May tried to recall if Vernon had ever mentioned the name during his business discussions, but nothing came to mind. She glanced at Jed's sleeping form. In repose, the hard lines of his face softened, making him look younger. It struck her that despite everything he'd told her, she still knew very little about him. A war hero turned bounty hunter, turned recluse. A man who'd lost everything yet still possessed enough humanity to stop for a stranger in distress. Midnight came too quickly. May touched Jed's shoulder lightly. He woke instantly, hand moving to his gun before his eyes had fully opened. "Your watch," she said softly. Jed nodded, sitting up. "Any trouble?" "All quiet. Get some rest. Tomorrow might be difficult." May settled by the fire, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Jed?" "Hmm?" "Thank you for everything." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the low firelight. "Sleep, May. Dawn comes early." She closed her eyes, listening to his quiet movements as he took up his watch position. Despite the uncertainty that lay ahead, May felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it not as Vernon Pike's broken wife, but as May Hollister, a woman who had found her courage again. Silver Creek came into view shortly before noon the next day. The town was larger than May had expected, a cluster of wooden buildings straddling the creek that gave it its name. A church steeple rose above the other structures, its white paint gleaming in the sunlight. Jed reined in on a ridge overlooking the settlement. "We'll approach carefully. If Vernon beat us here, he'll have men watching." May scanned the town, heart racing at the thought of seeing Abigail again. The church, that's where Abigail said she'd be. Jed's expression was troubled. "Let's hope so." He urged the horse forward at a walk. "Keep your eyes open. Anything looks wrong, we ride hard in the opposite direction." They entered town from the north, avoiding the main street. Jed kept his hat pulled low, shoulders hunched to alter his silhouette. May did the same, though her borrowed men's clothing would likely be disguise enough. The streets were busy with midday traffic, miners, shopkeepers, and ranch hands going about their business. No one paid much attention to two dusty travelers on a tired horse. They circled around to approach the church from behind, tying their mount in a small copse of trees. The church itself was modest but well-maintained, with a small graveyard to one side and what appeared to be a rectory behind it. "Wait here," Jed said, checking his gun. "I'll scout the place first." "I should go. Abigail will recognize me. And so will Vernon's men if they're watching." Jed's tone brooked no argument. "Give me 10 minutes." May reluctantly stayed put, watching as Jed slipped around the side of the church. The minutes stretched endlessly as she waited, hand resting on the pistol he'd given her. When Jed finally returned, his expression was grim. "Church is empty," he said. "No sign of a priest or your sister." May's heart sank. Could they be in town somewhere? Maybe. But I asked a boy, sweeping the steps of the mercantile. He said Father Michael left 2 days ago with a woman matching your sister's description. Left? Where to? Boy didn't know, just said they departed in a hurry after some men came looking for them. Jed's eyes scanned the street. Men riding for the Pike brand. May's hands clenched into fists. "Vernon got here first. He has Abigail." "We don't know that for certain. The boy said they left before the men arrived, not with them." Jed touched her arm. "There's a saloon across town. Bartenders hear things. Might be worth asking there." They left the horse tied and made their way through back alleys toward the saloon. The Silver Spur was doing brisk business despite the early hour, with miners and cowboys alike drowning their sorrows or celebrating their fortunes. Jed led May to a corner table with a good view of both the door and the bar. "Stay here. Keep your head down." He approached the bar, exchanging words with the bartender that May couldn't hear over the noise. Money changed hands and the bartender pointed toward a door at the rear of the establishment. Jed returned, leaning close to speak in her ear. "There's a man named Doyle in the back room. Used to work at the church, got fired last month. Bartender says he knows something about Father Michael but won't talk without payment. We don't have much money left. We have enough." Jed stood. "Come on, but let me do the talking." The back room turned out to be a small storeroom lined with whiskey barrels. A man sat on an upturned crate, nursing a glass of amber liquid. He was middle-aged, with the ruddy complexion of a longtime drinker. "Mr. Doyle?" Jed asked. The man looked up blearily. "Depends who's asking." "Heard you might know something about Father Michael, and a woman who was staying with him." Doyle's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Information costs." Jed dropped a few coins on the barrel beside Doyle. "Start talking." The man pocketed the money with practiced speed. "Ain't much to tell. Michael ain't no real priest. Showed up about a year ago talking fancy and quoting scripture. People believed him 'cause they wanted to." "If he's not a priest, who is he?" May asked, ignoring Jed's warning glance. Doyle chuckled. "Lady asks good questions. Name's Michael Blake. Runs with his brothers Jeremiah and Isaiah, the Blake brothers gang. Church is just a front for their operation." May felt the blood drain from her face. Abigail had sought sanctuary with the very criminals Vernon was working with. "The woman," Jed pressed, "where did they take her?" "Blake has a place up in the hills, old mining camp called Redemption." Doyle took a long swallow of whiskey. "That's where they take special guests." "Prisoners, you mean?" May said. Doyle shrugged. "Call it what you want. Blake likes playing games. Pretending to be a priest is just one of them." "How do we find this camp?" Jed asked. "Follow the creek north about 10 miles, then east into the foothills. Can't miss the old mine entrance." Doyle eyed them shrewdly. "Though if you're thinking of paying a visit, might want to reconsider. Blake's got at least a dozen men up there. They don't take kindly to uninvited guests." Jed dropped another coin on the barrel. "You never saw us." "Mister, for the right price, I never see nobody." Doyle pocketed the money with a gap-toothed grin. Outside, May grabbed Jed's arm. "Abigail's with the Blake brothers. She must have discovered who Father Michael really was. Or they found out she was gathering evidence against Vernon." Jed's expression was thunderous. "Either way, we need to move fast." "But you heard Doyle. There's at least a dozen men up there." "Then we'll need to be smarter, not stronger." Jed led her back toward where they'd left the horse. "First thing is to make sure we're not followed." As they rounded the corner of the alley, a voice called out, "Well now, if it ain't Sergeant Lawson himself." Silas stood blocking their path, flanked by Quinn and two other men May didn't recognize. All four had hands hovering near their guns. "Mr. Pike figured you might show up here," Silas continued. "Sent us to extend an invitation to join him." His cold eyes shifted to May. "Both of you." "Where's my sister?" May demanded. Quinn laughed. "Oh, she's getting real acquainted with Mr. Blake and his brothers. Quite the reunion, I hear." May lunged forward, but Jed caught her arm. "Not now," he muttered. Silas's smile was predatory. "Smart man. Now you two are coming with us. Mr. Pike is most eager for a proper conversation." "And if we decline," Jed's voice was deceptively calm, "then we deliver you in pieces." Silas drew his gun. "Your choice, Sergeant." May felt Jed tense beside her, calculating odds they both knew were impossible. 4 guns against 1, in a narrow alley with nowhere to run. "Put the gun away, Silas," came a new voice from behind them. May turned to see a tall, bearded man standing at the mouth of the alley. His clothes were simple, a blacksmith's apron over a cotton shirt, but the shotgun in his hands commanded attention. "This ain't your business, Cooper," Silas growled. "When 4 men draw on a friend in my town, it becomes my business." The man, Cooper, stepped forward, shotgun steady. "Jed and I go back, way back." Jed's surprise was evident, but he recovered quickly. "Isaiah, didn't know you'd settled here." "Blacksmith shop, going on 5 years now." Cooper's eyes never left Silas. "You boys work for Pike, I understand. Well, Pike has no authority here, so why don't you holster those guns before this gets messy?" For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Silas slowly lowered his weapon. "This ain't over," he warned, backing away. "Pike and Blake both want a word with these two. They'll get it, one way or another." When Silas and his men had disappeared around the corner, Cooper lowered his shotgun. "You look like hell, Jed." "Feel worse." Jed clasped the man's hand. "Thanks for the intervention." "Figured I owed you one after Antietam." Cooper's gaze shifted to May. "Ma'am?" "May Hollister," Jed said by way of introduction. May, this is Isaiah Cooper. We serve together. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Cooper, and grateful for your timing. Cooper nodded. Best get off the street. Pike's men will be back with reinforcements. He jerked his head toward the end of the alley. My shop's just there. We can talk safely. The blacksmith shop was sweltering from the forge but offered welcome shelter. Cooper bolted the door behind them and offered water from a clay pitcher. How'd you end up here, Isaiah? Jed asked as they settled on wooden stools. After my discharge, drifted west like many. Found work shoeing horses, fixing wagons. Silver Creek needed a blacksmith. Cooper studied Jed. Heard you were dead, court-martialed and executed. Nearly was, got lucky. And now your luck's run thin from the looks of it. Cooper's gaze shifted to May. What's Pike want with you, ma'am, besides the obvious? May straightened. I'm his wife, or was. I found evidence he's working with the Blake brothers, laundering money from train robberies. Cooper let out a low whistle. Dangerous knowledge. My sister Abigail is being held at a place called Redemption, May continued. We need to find her before... She couldn't finish the sentence. Redemption. Cooper's expression darkened. Bad place. Old mining camp the Blakes use for their operations. Heavily guarded. You know it? Jed leaned forward. Know of it. Few who go there return to tell stories. Cooper stroked his beard thoughtfully. But I might know a way in that don't involve the front door. Hope flared in May's chest. You'd help us? Cooper looked at Jed. You saved my life at Antietam. Carried me 2 miles under fire when my leg was shot to pieces. He rolled up his pant leg, revealing a wooden prosthetic. Least I can do is return the favor. It's not just the Blakes, Jed warned. Vernon Pike is there too. Pike, Cooper spat the name. Man's been the plague on this region for years. Buys influence, threatens those who stand against him. He stood, decision made. I'm in, and I know 2 more who will join us. Former soldiers who've no love for Pike or the Blakes. 4 against a dozen? May shook her head. It's still suicide. Not if we're smart, Cooper grinned, and I've got a plan that might just even the odds. As Cooper outlined his thinking, May found herself studying Jed's face. For the first time since she'd met him, there was something besides grim determination in his eyes. There was hope. Isaiah Cooper's blacksmith shop became their war room as darkness fell over Silver Creek. Lamplight cast long shadows against the walls while Cooper unfurled a crude map of the surrounding hills on his workbench. Redemption sits here, he said, jabbing a calloused finger at a spot where 2 lines intersected. Abandoned silver mine turned Blake Brothers hideout. Main approach follows this ridge, heavily guarded. Jed leaned over the map, eyes narrowed. Any other way in? That's where it gets interesting. Cooper traced a faint line running parallel to the creek. Old supply tunnel, dug when the mine was still producing. Most folks have forgotten it exists. The Blakes haven't? May asked, studying the map intently. Cooper's beard twitched with his smile. Mining company collapsed it after a cave-in killed 3 men back in '78. Bad luck, they said, but they only blocked the entrance. You're saying it's still passable? Jed's voice carried both hope and skepticism. Marcus cleared enough of it last year when he was tracking a mountain lion that killed his prize calf. Cooper straightened, rolling his shoulders. Says it runs all the way to the main shaft. The shop door opened, admitting 2 men who moved with the quiet confidence of predators. The first was lean and wiry, with silver-streaked hair and hawkish features. The second towered over them all, broad-shouldered and solemn, with hands like hams and a face mapped with old scars. Jed Lawson, the silver-haired man said, removing his hat. Isaiah said you'd risen from the dead. Not quite dead yet, Marcus. Jed clasped the man's hand. Good to see you. Likewise, Marcus nodded toward May. Ma'am. Cooper made the introductions. May Hollister. Meet Marcus Reeves and Jackson Smith. Best tracker in 3 territories and the strongest man I've ever known, respectively. May acknowledged this with a nod. Thank you for coming. Any enemy of the Blakes is a friend of ours, Marcus said simply. His eyes, sharp as a falcon's, assessed May with uncomfortable directness. Isaiah says Vernon Pike is holding your sister. Yes, and if my suspicions are correct, he's working with the Blakes on their train robberies. Wouldn't surprise me, Jackson rumbled, speaking for the first time. His voice was unexpectedly gentle for such a large man. Pike's been buying up failed mines all through these hills. Good cover for moving stolen goods. Cooper brought the newcomers up to speed on their nascent plan. Marcus studied the map with professional interest, occasionally asking questions about distances and terrain. Jackson remained silent, arms crossed, but his attention never wavered. "The tunnel's our best approach," Marcus confirmed when Cooper finished. "But we'll need a distraction at the main entrance to draw their attention while we slip in." "What kind of distraction?" May asked. "Something loud," Cooper said with a grim smile. "And convincing." Jed straightened, decision made. "I'll create the distraction. The rest of you get in through the tunnel and find Abigail." "No," May's voice was firm. "We stay together." "She's right," Marcus said. "Splitting up reduces our chances. We need a distraction that doesn't require one of us to sacrifice themselves." Jackson cleared his throat. "I have dynamite, from clearing tree stumps on my property." 4 pairs of eyes turned to him. "How much dynamite?" Jed asked carefully. "Enough?" Jackson's face remained impassive. "Could rig it to blow from a distance, make them think they're under attack from a larger force." Cooper slapped Jackson's massive shoulder. "And here I thought you were just pretty to look at." A plan began to take shape as the night deepened. Marcus would lead them through the hidden tunnel while Jackson set explosives at strategic points near the main entrance. Timing would be critical. The blast needed to draw the Blake's men away from the interior just as the rescue party emerged from the tunnel. "What about weapons?" May asked during a lull in the planning. Jed's expression darkened. "I won't ask you to kill, May. And I won't stay behind." Her eyes met his, unwavering. "I can shoot. My father taught me before he died. Vernon never knew." "Lady's got spirit," Cooper observed. "Reminds me of my Caroline." "I've got extra revolvers," Marcus said, "and a rifle that's light enough for a woman to handle, if she's determined." May smiled grimly. "I'm determined." As the men continued refining their plan, May stepped outside for a moment of fresh air. The night was cool, star brilliant in the clear mountain sky. She inhaled deeply, trying to calm the fear that churned in her stomach. Abigail was so close, perhaps only hours away, yet still in terrible danger. The door opened behind her, and Jed's familiar presence joined her in the darkness. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly. May shook her head. "No, just preparing myself." "It's not too late to reconsider. You could stay in town, wait for us to bring Abigail back." "My sister's in danger because of me, because I wasn't strong enough to leave Vernon sooner." May turned to face him, moonlight silvering her features. "I won't hide while others risk their lives to correct my mistakes." Jed was silent for a moment. "You're not responsible for Vernon's cruelty." "Maybe not, but I am responsible for my own courage, or lack of it." Her voice softened. "You've shown me what real courage looks like, Jed. Don't ask me to show less." He studied her face, seeing not the beaten woman he'd found hanging from a stable beam, but someone transformed by determination and hope. Finally, he nodded. "Marcus will show you how to use the rifle. Follow his instructions exactly." "I will." They stood in companionable silence, the sounds of Silver Creek's nightlife drifting up from the main street below, piano music from the saloon, occasional laughter, the distant howl of a coyote. "When this is over," May said suddenly, "what will you do?" The question hung between them, laden with possibilities neither dared voice. "Haven't thought that far ahead," Jed replied, echoing his words from days earlier. But this time they rang hollow even to his own ears. May's hand found his in the darkness, her fingers warm despite the night chill. "Maybe it's time you did." Before Jed could respond, the door opened again, spilling lamplight onto the porch. "Time to move," Cooper announced. "Marcus says there's a storm brewing in the mountains. We need to reach the tunnel before it hits." Their moment of connection broken, May withdrew her hand. But something had shifted between them, a tentative bridge forming across the chasm of their respective pasts. As they gathered supplies and weapons, Jed found himself watching May, her confident movements, the determined set of her jaw. He'd been existing rather than living for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to have a purpose beyond mere survival. Now looking at her, he felt something he'd thought long dead stirring within him. Hope, fragile but persistent, like the first green shoot after a devastating wildfire. The journey to redemption took them through terrain that grew increasingly rugged as they left Silver Creek behind. They traveled by moonlight, avoiding the main trails where Vernon's men might be watching. Marcus led the way, his instinct for the land keeping them on course even when the path seemed to disappear into the wilderness. True to Cooper's warning, a storm was building in the mountains ahead, dark clouds obscuring the stars in that direction. The air felt charged with electricity, heavy with the promise of rain. Tunnel entrance is just beyond that ridge, Marcus said, pointing to a rocky outcropping silhouetted against the night sky. If we're lucky, the storm will give us extra cover. And if we're unlucky? May asked, adjusting the rifle slung across her back. Lightning might attract unwanted attention, Cooper replied, or the tunnel could flood if the rain's heavy enough. Comforting thought, Jed muttered. They tethered their horses in a small copse of trees and continued on foot. Marcus moved with surprising agility for his age, picking his way over loose scree and around thorny brush with the confidence of a man who'd spent his life in wild places. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a curtain of overgrown vegetation, the original timber supports now rotted and sagging. Marcus brushed aside the foliage, revealing a narrow opening that seemed to swallow what little moonlight remained. It's tight for the first 50 feet, he explained, lighting a lantern. Opens up after that. Stay close and watch your footing. Jackson went first, his broad shoulders nearly scraping both sides of the passage. Cooper followed, then May, with Jed and Marcus bringing up the rear. The air grew stale as they penetrated deeper, carrying the musty scent of earth and decay. May fought against rising claustrophobia, focusing on the pool of light ahead rather than the oppressive darkness pressing in from all sides. The weight of the mountain above them seemed to increase with each step, a physical presence bearing down on her shoulders. Breathe slow and steady, Jed murmured from behind her, sensing her distress. One foot in front of the other. His voice anchored her, providing a lifeline to cling to as the passage narrowed further. May counted her steps, using the rhythm to calm her racing heart. 23, 24, 25. At step 48, the tunnel abruptly widened, the ceiling rising enough that even Jackson could stand upright. Marcus raised his lantern, revealing rough-hewn walls supported by timber beams at regular intervals. Water trickled down one wall, forming small puddles on the uneven floor. Main shaft should be about half a mile ahead, Marcus said, his voice echoing slightly. From there, we'll need to locate where they're keeping prisoners. If Blake's pattern holds true, they'll be in the old foreman's office, Cooper added. Solid stone walls, one entrance, easy to guard. The distant rumble of thunder reached them, muffled by layers of rock. The storm was getting closer. They moved forward in single file, Marcus scanning for signs of danger or instability. The air grew gradually warmer, suggesting they were approaching areas that might be occupied. After 20 minutes of cautious progress, Marcus raised his hand, signaling a halt. Ahead, a faint glow indicated artificial light. End of the tunnel, he whispered. Main shaft begins just around that bend. Jackson, time to set your diversion. The big man nodded, slipping off the pack containing his explosives. Need about 10 minutes. When you hear the first blast, count to 30 before the second. That's your window to move. We'll wait here until you're back, Jed said. Jackson disappeared down a narrow side tunnel, moving with surprising silence for a man his size. The remaining four huddled in the darkness, extinguishing their lantern to avoid detection. What's the plan once we're inside? May whispered. Cooper and I will secure the exit route, Marcus replied. You and Jed find Abigail. Jackson will catch up once the explosives are placed. Remember, Jed added, our objective is Abigail. We get her and leave. No heroics, no vendettas. The last comment seemed directed as much at himself as at the others. May wondered if he truly believed it. After all, both the men who had destroyed his life, Vernon Pike and Michael Blake, waited above. Jackson returned, moving as silently as he'd departed. Done. Charges set at the main entrance in the ore processing shed. First one blows in 8 minutes. Let's move, Marcus said, relighting the lantern but keeping the flame low. They advanced to the tunnel's end, finding themselves in a much larger chamber, the base of the main shaft. Abandoned mining equipment lay scattered about, rusting in the damp air. A crude elevator platform hung suspended from fraying ropes, while a wooden staircase zigzagged up the wall to upper levels. Marcus pointed to a tunnel opening across the chamber. That leads to the living quarters and offices. Foreman's office would be one level up from there. Guards? Jed asked. Two at the entrance to the living quarters, probably more inside. Jed checked his revolver. We wait for the explosion, then move, quick and quiet. The minutes stretched endlessly as they crouched in the shadows, watching the guards at their post. Both men looked bored, occasionally exchanging comments too low to hear. One smoked a cigarette, the ember glowing bright in the dimness. A sudden tremor shook the chamber, dust and small stones raining down from the ceiling. The blast, though distant, sent a pressure wave through the tunnel that made their ears pop. The guards jerked to attention, exchanging alarmed glances. What the hell was that? One shouted. Sounded like dynamite, the other replied. Main entrance. A second guard appeared from the tunnel. Blake wants everyone up top. We're under attack. The guards hesitated, clearly reluctant to abandon their post. Everyone means you too, idiots, the messenger snapped. Move! As the guards raced toward the staircase, Marcus began counting under his breath. 5, 10, 15. At 30, the second explosion rocked the mine, louder and closer than the first. The remaining lanterns swayed violently, casting frantic shadows across the walls. Now, Jed hissed. They sprinted across the open chamber toward the unguarded tunnel, Marcus in the lead. No one challenged them as they entered the living quarters, a series of rough-hewn rooms carved into the rock, sparsely furnished with cots and crates. Stairs should be at the end of this corridor, Cooper whispered, gesturing ahead. They moved swiftly, alert for any guard who might have remained behind. The upper level contained several doors along a narrow hallway. Most stood open, revealing simple office spaces or storage areas. At the far end, a heavy wooden door remained closed, a padlock securing it from the outside. There, May breathed. That has to be it. Jed approached the door cautiously. Abigail, he called softly. Abigail Hollister? A moment of silence, then a woman's voice, hoarse but clear. Who's there? May rushed forward. Abigail! It's me, May! May? Disbelief colored the voice. God in heaven, is it really you? Stand back from the door, Jed instructed. He nodded to Jackson, who stepped forward and snapped the padlock with a powerful twist of his hands. The door swung open to reveal a small office converted to a cell. A woman sat on a narrow cot, her wrists bound, face bruised, but eyes alert and defiant. Her resemblance to May was striking. The same determined chin, the same steadfast gaze, though Abigail's hair was darker and cut short. May flew into the room, embracing her sister with a sob of relief. I thought I'd lost you. Abigail returned the embrace awkwardly with her bound hands. How did you find me? How did you escape Vernon? Later, Jed said from the doorway. We need to move now while they're distracted. Jackson cut through Abigail's bonds with a hunting knife. She rubbed her wrists, wincing at the raw skin beneath. Can you walk? May asked, helping her sister stand. I can run if necessary, Abigail replied with grim determination. She studied the men with quick, assessing glances. Who are your friends? Allies, Jed said shortly. Time for introductions later. Marcus, lead us out. They retraced their steps down the corridor, Abigail leaning on May for support. The main chamber remained empty, the guards still occupied with the disturbance at the entrance. Almost too easy, Cooper muttered as they reached the tunnel entrance. His words proved prophetic. As they crossed the chamber, a voice rang out from above. Well now, isn't this interesting? Vernon Pike stood on the staircase landing, flanked by Silas and a tall, bearded man in a preacher's collar, who could only be Michael Blake. All three held rifles aimed at the group below. Predictable but interesting, Vernon continued, descending the stairs with deliberate steps. Did you really think a little dynamite would distract us from our most valuable guest? Jed pushed May and Abigail behind him, his hand hovering near his holstered revolver. Pike. Sergeant Lawson, Vernon smiled coldly. And friends, I see. How touching that you found allies in your last hours. Michael Blake remained on the landing, his rifle unwavering. The woman stays. The rest of you can join my men in hell. Nobody's joining anyone in hell today except maybe you, Cooper growled, his own weapon now drawn. Bold words from a cripple, Vernon sneered. The tableau held for a heartbeat, 6 rescuers partially concealed in shadow, 3 captors with the advantage of higher ground. The air between them crackled with lethal potential. Jed broke the silence. Abigail has evidence of your arrangement with the Blakes. Train robberies, money laundering, probably murder. How many law enforcement agencies would be interested in that information, do you think? Evidence? Vernon laughed. You mean her pathetic little diary, full of speculation and women's hysteria? No court would— Not her diary, Jed interrupted. Your ledger, the one May found in your office. We made copies before coming here. It was a bluff, but a calculated one. May glanced at Jed, careful to keep her expression neutral, despite her surprise. Vernon's smile faltered slightly. You're lying. Federal marshals have a copy already, Jed continued smoothly. Kill us, and they'll know exactly who to come for. Blake shifted uneasily on the landing. You said there was no evidence, Pike, that it was contained. He's bluffing, Vernon snapped, but doubt had crept into his voice. A distant rumble of thunder punctuated the tense silence that followed. The storm was directly overhead now, its power vibrating through the mountain. May seized the moment of uncertainty. It's over, Vernon. Let us leave, and maybe you'll get leniency for cooperation. Leniency? Vernon's face contorted with rage. I built an empire while this one-legged failure and washed-up soldier were scraping by. He leveled his rifle at Jed. I should have killed you at Antietam when I had the chance. Everything happened at once. Vernon fired, the shot echoing deafeningly in the chamber. Jed dove sideways, returning fire as he moved. Marcus and Cooper spread out, creating multiple targets. Jackson pushed May and Abigail toward the tunnel entrance. Go, he shouted. We'll follow. May hesitated, torn between flight and fear for Jed. She glimpsed him rolling behind a piece of mining equipment, still exchanging fire with Vernon. May, come on! Abigail tugged at her arm. A bullet splintered the wood beside them, deciding the matter. May retreated into the tunnel with Abigail, Jackson close behind. Cooper appeared moments later, blood streaming from a graze on his arm. Marcus and Jed are covering our retreat, he panted. Keep moving. They hurried through the tunnel, the sounds of gunfire growing fainter behind them. The air seemed thicker than before, harder to breathe. May realized with horror that water was now flowing steadily down one wall. The storm had found ways to penetrate the mountain. Tunnels flooding, Jackson confirmed grimly. Storm must be worse than we thought. They pushed forward, the water rising around their ankles. Cooper kept glancing behind them, clearly concerned about their missing companions. They'll make it, May insisted, as much to convince herself as the others. After what seemed an eternity, Marcus appeared from the darkness behind them, limping but mobile. Jed? May asked immediately. Marcus shook his head. Still back there. Said he had unfinished business. May stopped in her tracks. We can't leave him. He ordered us to get you and your sister out, Marcus replied. Man was quite specific about it. Damn his orders. May started back the way they'd come. Jackson caught her arm, his grip gentle but immovable. Water's rising fast. Tunnel will be impassable soon. Then I'll hurry. May wrenched free. Get Abigail to safety. I'll find Jed. May, don't be foolish, Abigail pleaded. He wouldn't want you to die for him. And I won't let him die because of us. May's determination was absolute. Go. I'll find another way out if necessary. Cooper cursed colorfully, then unholstered his revolver and handed it to her. Extra ammunition in the pouch. Try not to get killed. Paperwork's a nightmare. May accepted the weapon with a nod of thanks. Take care of my sister. Before anyone could argue further, she plunged back into the darkness, moving as quickly as the rising water would allow. The men's voices faded behind her, replaced by the ominous gurgle of floodwater finding new channels through the mountain's veins. The main shaft was in chaos when May reached it. Water cascaded from the upper levels, turning the floor into a treacherous, ankle-deep pool. The staircase still stood, but sections had splintered under the force of the deluge. No sign of Jed, Vernon, or Blake. May waded carefully across the chamber, searching for any indication of which way Jed might have gone. A trail of blood droplets caught her eye, small, dark spots leading toward a side tunnel she hadn't noticed before. Following the trail, she entered a narrow passage that sloped upward, eventually emerging into what had once been the mine's administrative office. Rain lashed through broken windows, soaking maps and papers scattered across the floor. A crash from above drew her attention. The office connected to an external staircase that led to the mine's surface operations. And from the sounds of struggle, that's where she'd find Jed. May climbed the stairs, Cooper's revolver held ready. The storm hit her full force as she emerged onto the landing, rain stinging her face and wind threatening to topple her. Through the downpour, she made out three figures locked in mortal combat. Jed and Vernon grappled near the edge of a steep drop, while Blake lay motionless nearby, face down in a growing puddle of blood. Vernon had Jed pinned against the railing, hands locked around his throat. Jed's face was purpling, his struggles weakening as oxygen deprivation took its toll. May raised the revolver, but the howling wind and rain made aiming impossible from this distance. She'd be as likely to hit Jed as Vernon. Closing the distance, she shouted, "Let him go, Vernon!" Neither man appeared to hear her over the storm's fury. Vernon's back was to her, his attention focused entirely on choking the life from Jed. May moved closer, trying to find an angle for a clean shot. The metal landing was slippery with rain, forcing her to move with agonizing slowness. Just as she reached effective range, Jed's knee came up hard between Vernon's legs. The rancher's grip loosened reflexively, allowing Jed to drive an elbow into his jaw. Vernon staggered backward, momentarily dazed. "Jed!" May shouted. He turned, surprise flashing across his face. "May, get back inside!" The momentary distraction was all Vernon needed. He lunged, tackling Jed with his full weight. Both men slammed against the railing, which gave way with a shriek of tearing metal. May screamed as they disappeared over the edge. She rushed forward, heedless of the slippery surface, and looked down. A ledge about 15 feet below had broken their fall. Jed clung to a rocky outcropping, one hand gripping Vernon's wrist. The rancher dangled above a 100-foot drop to jagged rocks below, his face a mask of terror. "Hold on," May called, searching frantically for a way down to them. "Can't." Jed's voice was strained, his grip slipping. "Too heavy." Vernon's eyes locked with May's. For the first time since she'd known him, the arrogance was gone, replaced by naked fear. "May," he pleaded, "help me." She stood frozen, the man who had tormented her now completely at her mercy. All it would take was a word to Jed, and Vernon would fall to a death he richly deserved. "May," Jed's voice pulled her back. "Can't hold much longer." In that moment, May Hollister made her choice. Not out of love or forgiveness, but because allowing Vernon to die would stain her own soul in ways she refused to accept. "There's a rope in Blake's pack," she said, pointing to the fallen outlaw's equipment. "Hold on, Jed. Just hold on." Working with desperate speed, May secured the rope to a sturdy post and lowered it toward the men. Rain lashed her face, nearly blinding her, but she persevered. "Jed, can you reach it?" she called. "Send it to Vernon first," he replied, voice strained with effort. "What? No, you first. If I let go to grab the rope, he falls. Get him first." May wanted to argue, but recognized the logic in Jed's plan. She lowered the rope toward Vernon, who grasped it with desperate strength. "Climb," she shouted. Vernon began pulling himself up, hand over hand, his movements frantic with fear. When he reached the top, May kept him covered with Cooper's revolver while lowering the rope again for Jed. "Don't try anything," she warned Vernon, who sat slumped against a post, exhaustion written in every line of his body. "No tricks left," he muttered. "Just get him up." Jed's ascent was slower, hampered by what appeared to be a gunshot wound to his shoulder. May helped haul him over the edge, relief flooding through her as his boots touched solid ground. "You came back," he said, disbelief coloring his voice. "Of course I did." May examined his shoulder, wincing at the amount of blood soaking his shirt. "Can you walk?" "Have to, don't I?" Jed managed a weak smile. "Main tunnel's probably flooded by now." "There must be another way out," May insisted, supporting his weight as he stood. Vernon pushed himself upright. "Service shaft, east side of the complex, leads straight to the surface." May kept the revolver trained on him. "Why should we trust you?" "Because I want to live," Vernon replied simply. "Blake's men will be looking for someone to blame for this mess. I'd rather take my chances with the law." Jed studied his former comrade with contempt. "Still looking out for yourself after all these years?" It's kept me alive, Vernon retorted, more than I can say for your noble ideals. A fresh torrent of rain interrupted their exchange, the storm showing no signs of abating. Water was beginning to pool around their feet. We need to move, May said. Which way to this service shaft? Vernon pointed toward a cluster of buildings barely visible through the downpour. Through the assay office, follow the rail tracks. With Jed leaning heavily on May and Vernon leading the way, they staggered across the mining complex. The storm had driven everyone else to shelter, leaving them alone in the tempest. The service shaft proved to be little more than a narrow hole in the mountainside with a crude ladder bolted to one wall. It would be a difficult climb under ideal conditions. With Jed injured and the shaft slick with rainwater, it seemed nearly impossible. I'll go first, Vernon said, eyeing the opening dubiously. Make sure it's clear at the top. So you can run? May challenged. Where would I go in this? He gestured at the storm. Blake's men want me dead, and every lawman in the territory will be looking for me once the marshal gets those ledgers you mentioned. May kept her expression neutral, not revealing that the ledgers had been a bluff. Go, but I'll be right behind you. Vernon began the ascent, his movements cautious on the slippery rungs. May helped Jed to the ladder. Can you make it? She asked. He tested his injured arm, grimacing. No choice. You go between us. Keep an eye on Vernon. The climb was brutal. The shaft ran straight up for nearly 60 feet, each rung a test of endurance. Jed followed doggedly, his breath coming in harsh gasps that May could hear despite the storm's roar. Vernon remained just ahead of her, occasionally glancing down as if to verify they still followed. When they finally emerged onto the mountainside, the full force of the storm hit them. Wind-driven rain reduced visibility to mere feet, while thunder crashed overhead with deafening frequency. Where now? May shouted over the din. Down! Vernon pointed toward the valley. Creek will be flooding. Need to reach higher ground on the other side. They stumbled down the slope, the ground treacherous with mud and loose rocks. Twice Jed nearly fell, saved only by May's supporting arm. Vernon led the way, seemingly confident of his direction despite the near-zero visibility. The creek had indeed become a raging torrent, its banks overflowing. What had been a gentle stream during their approach was now an impassable barrier. There's a footbridge half a mile downstream, Vernon called, used by the miners during spring floods. They followed the creek's new edge, fighting against the wind with every step. Jed's strength was clearly failing, his face ashen beneath the mud and blood. Just a little farther, May encouraged, though she had no way of knowing if it was true. The bridge, when they reached it, barely deserved the name, a simple affair of rope and wooden slats that swayed alarmingly in the wind. It stretched perhaps 30 feet across the churning water, secured to large boulders on either bank. That doesn't look safe, May said doubtfully. It's not, Vernon agreed, but it's the only way across unless you fancy a swim. You first, Jed managed, his voice barely audible over the storm. Vernon stepped onto the bridge, testing its stability before committing his full weight. The structure held, though it swayed with each cautious step. He made it halfway across before turning back. One at a time, he shouted, and move quickly. May helped Jed to the bridge's edge. Can you manage? He nodded grimly. Get across first. I'll follow. I'm not leaving you again. Not leaving, just going ahead. Jed squeezed her hand. Trust me. Reluctantly, May stepped onto the bridge. The wooden slats were slippery, forcing her to grip the guide ropes with white-knuckled intensity. She kept her eyes fixed on Vernon, who had nearly reached the far side. Halfway across, a flash of movement on the opposite bank caught her attention. Through the curtain of rain, she glimpsed familiar figures. Cooper, Marcus, Jackson, and Abigail, sheltering beneath an overhanging rock. Abigail, she called, relief surging through her. Her sister's head jerked up, eyes widening as she spotted May on the bridge. She started forward, only to be restrained by Jackson. Vernon reached the bank just as May made this discovery. He seemed equally surprised to find the rescue party waiting, his steps faltering momentarily. Cooper's revolver appeared, trained on Vernon with unwavering steadiness. No words were exchanged, none were necessary. Vernon slowly raised his hands in surrender. May continued her careful crossing, eager now to reach her sister. Behind her, Jed had begun his journey across the swaying bridge, his movements painfully slow but determined. Then disaster struck. A lightning bolt hit a tree near the bridge's far anchor. the explosive crack deafening even above the storm's roar. The tree split, falling across the anchor point and dislodging the boulder that secured the bridge. May felt the structure lurch beneath her. She lunged forward, diving for the bank as the far end of the bridge came free. Cooper and Jackson caught her arms, hauling her to safety as the bridge collapsed. "Jed!" she screamed, turning to see him clinging to the guide rope, now dangling above the raging creek. The bridge swung like a pendulum, smashing against the rocky bank before rebounding into space. Jed hung on grimly, but his injured arm was giving out. Without hesitation, Jackson grabbed the remaining anchor rope, wrapping it around his massive forearm. "Pull when I say!" he shouted to Marcus and Cooper. With stunning courage, the big man threw himself into space, sliding down the guide rope toward Jed. The added weight caused the rope to sag dangerously, bringing both men perilously close to the churning water below. Jackson reached Jed just as the wounded man's grip failed. He caught him with one arm, holding them both suspended above certain death. "Pull!" Jackson roared. Cooper, Marcus, and even Vernon seized the anchor rope, heaving with desperate strength. Inch by painful inch, they raised the rope, lifting Jackson and Jed away from the hungry water. May and Abigail joined the effort, adding their strength to the rescue. The rope cut into their hands, but no one dared release their grip. With a final heroic effort, they pulled Jackson within reach of the bank. Cooper and Marcus lunged forward, grabbing his shoulders and hauling him and his precious burden to safety. Jed lay motionless on the muddy ground, face gray, eyes closed. For one terrible moment, May thought they'd been too late. Then his chest rose in a shallow breath, and her own lungs remembered how to function. "He needs shelter," Marcus said, already examining the wound. "Bullet's still in there." "My cabin's closest," Cooper replied, "about a mile east of here." Vernon, momentarily forgotten, made a sudden break for freedom. He'd taken only 3 steps when Abigail's voice cut through the storm. "Stop, or I'll shoot you where you stand." May turned in shock to see her sister holding Marcus's spare revolver with the steady hands of someone who knew how to use it. Vernon froze, then slowly raised his hands again. "Bind him," Abigail instructed Cooper. "He's not escaping justice this time." As they fashioned makeshift restraints for Vernon, May knelt beside Jed, cradling his head in her lap. "Hold on," she whispered. "We're almost safe." His eyes flickered open, focusing on her face with effort. "You came back for me." "Always." The word emerged with the force of a vow. A hint of a smile touched his pale lips before unconsciousness claimed him once more. The storm continued its assault, but its fury seemed diminished now. Jackson lifted Jed's limp form as gently as a mother might carry a child. Together, the battered group set off toward Cooper's cabin, leaving redemption and its secrets behind them. As they struggled through the rain, May walked beside her sister, their shoulders occasionally brushing. No words were needed between them. The simple fact of their reunion, against all odds, said everything. Behind them, Vernon Pike stumbled along, bound and defeated. The empire he'd built on betrayal and cruelty was crumbling around him, just as the storm had broken the bridge that nearly claimed Jed's life. Justice, May reflected, took many forms. Sometimes it came as a reckoning, sometimes as a rescue, and sometimes, most preciously, it came as a second chance. Dawn broke reluctantly over Isaiah Cooper's cabin, pale light seeping through rain-streaked windows to reveal a scene of exhausted vigilance. May sat beside the narrow bed where Jed lay, her fingers laced through his, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Across the room, Abigail dozed in a rocking chair, a blanket draped over her shoulders. The storm had passed during the night, leaving a sodden landscape and swollen streams in its wake. Inside the cabin, the only sounds were the soft crackling of the fire and the occasional creak of floorboards as Marcus moved about, checking on his patient. "How is he?" May asked, her voice hoarse from a night spent in anxious silence. Marcus bent to examine the bandages on Jed's shoulder. "Fever's down, that's something." Extracting the bullet had been a gruesome affair, performed by lamplight on Cooper's kitchen table. May had held Jed's hand throughout, her grip tightening with each probe of Marcus's steady fingers into the wound. When the misshapen lead had finally emerged, slick with blood, Jed had been mercifully unconscious. "Will he?" May couldn't finish the question. "If infection doesn't set in." Marcus straightened, rubbing his lower back. Man survived worse. The door opened, admitting Cooper and Jackson. Both looked weary but satisfied. "Vernon's secure at the sheriff's office," Cooper announced, hanging his hat on a peg. Sheriff Thornton wasn't pleased to be woken before dawn, but he changed his tune when we mentioned federal jurisdiction. "And Blake?" May asked. "Dead," Jackson confirmed. "Found his body where you said it would be. Rest of his gang scattered when the storm hit. Marshall's organizing a posse to track them." Abigail stirred at the sound of voices, blinking away sleep. "What about the evidence? The ledger?" "Blake had it on him," Cooper replied, pouring himself coffee from the pot on the stove. "All that blood didn't do it any favors, but the important parts are still readable, enough to hang Vernon several times over." May's eyes returned to Jed's pale face. "It doesn't matter if he doesn't wake up." A calloused hand rested briefly on her shoulder. "He'll wake," Cooper said with quiet certainty. "Man's got unfinished business." Abigail rose, stretching stiff muscles. "You should rest, May. I'll sit with him." "I'm fine. You've been awake for 2 days straight." Abigail's tone was gentle but brooked no argument. "You won't help him by collapsing." Before May could protest further, a soft groan came from the bed. Jed's eyelids fluttered, then opened. His gaze, unfocused at first, eventually settled on May's face. "There you are," he murmured, voice barely audible. Relief flooded through her. "Here I am." "Vernon?" "In custody," Cooper supplied, moving to the bedside. "Blake's dead. It's over, Jed." A ghost of a smile touched Jed's lips. "Good." His eyes drifted closed again, but his fingers tightened around May's. "Good." The days that followed took on the gentle rhythm of healing. Jed's recovery progressed slowly but steadily, his natural resilience asserting itself despite the severity of his wounds. May and Abigail took turns tending to him, changing bandages, coaxing broth between his lips, and reading aloud from Cooper's modest collection of books. A week after the confrontation at Redemption, Federal Marshal Warren Cahill arrived in Silver Creek, bringing with him the weight of official justice. He took statements from everyone involved, his weathered face remaining impassive as the full extent of Vernon's crimes and Blake's operations came to light. "You folks have done the territory a service," he told them when the interviews concluded. "Blake brothers have been a thorn in our side for years. As for Pike, or Vernon, I should say, the evidence is overwhelming. He'll hang for treason, if nothing else." "And us?" Abigail asked. "What happens to May and me?" Cahill's expression softened slightly. "The Pike Ranch will be seized as criminal property, but there are legal provisions for innocent spouses. Mrs. Pike—" "Hollister," May corrected firmly. "May Hollister. Miss Hollister," Cahill amended with a nod, "should be entitled to a portion of the legitimate assets. As for the rest, there'll be a legal process. Could take months." "And Jed?" May pressed. "He was court-martialed for crimes Vernon committed. His name needs to be cleared." "Already in motion," Cahill assured her. "I've sent the relevant documents to the War Department. Given the circumstances, I expect a full pardon and restoration of rank and pension." The news brought a measure of peace to their small group. Cooper insisted they all remain at his home until matters were settled, his gruff generosity extending to enlarged sleeping quarters fashioned from his workshop. On the 10th day, Jed was finally strong enough to sit on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. May joined him, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Abigail's in town with Cooper," she explained, settling beside him. "Something about property claims." Jed accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "Your sister's a formidable woman." "She is," May smiled. "Always has been. Takes after our mother that way." They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun creep higher over the distant mountains. The landscape had recovered from the storm, autumn colors painting the hillsides in russet and gold. "Marshall says you'll get your name back," May said eventually. "And your pension." Jed seemed unimpressed by this news. "Don't know what I'd do with either, to be honest." "You could go home, back east." His eyes turned distant. "Nothing left for me there." Another silence stretched between them, comfortable yet laden with unspoken possibilities. "What about you?" Jed asked finally. "You and Abigail have plans?" May traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "Abigail's talking about opening a school here. Says Silver Creek needs education more than another saloon. She hesitated. As for me, I'm not sure yet. You could go anywhere now. Jed's voice was carefully neutral. Fresh start. I could, May turned to face him directly. Is that what you think I should do? Jed studied the contents of his well as if they held profound secrets. Think you should do whatever brings you peace. If after everything you have been through, you deserve that much. And what about you, Jed? What would bring you peace? His eyes met hers, naked honesty in their depths. Stop it believing in peace a long time ago, May. Best I've hoped for is quiet. And now, the question hung between them, delicate as frost on a window pane. Jed set his cup aside, his movements deliberate. Now I find myself hoping for things I have no right to ask for. May's heart quickened. Ask anyway. Before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses interrupted the moment. Cooper's wagon appeared on the track leading to the cabin, with Abigail seated beside him on the bench. Behind them rode Marshal Cahill and another man May didn't recognize. Jed straightened, wariness replacing the openness of moments before. Trouble. Don't think so, May replied, though uncertainty colored her voice. Cooper reined in the wagon, jumping down with surprising agility for a man with a wooden leg. Jed, May, got news you'll want to hear. Marshal Cahill dismounted more sedately, removing his hat as he approached the porch. Mr. Lawson, Miss Hollister, hope we're not interrupting. Never a bad time for the law, Jed responded dryly. This is Judge Hamilton, Cahill introduced the stranger, an elderly man with silver hair and shrewd eyes. He's here on official business. The judge nodded courteously. Mr. Lawson, Ms. Hollister, I've reviewed the evidence in both your cases with considerable interest. Cases? May echoed, confused. Samuel Vernon's crimes and their implications, the judge clarified. I've made some preliminary rulings I thought you should hear directly. He withdrew a folded document from his coat. First, Mr. Lawson, this is an official pardon and expungement of all charges related to the court-martial of 1863. Your military record is hereby restored, with full honors and back pension. He handed the document to Jed, who accepted it with a stunned expression. Second, Judge Hamilton continued, producing another paper, regarding the Pike or Vernon estate. Given the unusual circumstances, I've expedited certain aspects of the legal process. He turned to May. Ms. Hollister, as the legal wife of Samuel Vernon, you are entitled to 1/3 of all legitimate assets from the Pike Ranch. The remainder will be liquidated to compensate victims of his crimes. May blinked in surprise. 1/3? Approximately $15,000 by our estimate, Cahill supplied, plus 200 acres of the original homestead if you want it. Abigail squeezed her sister's hand. It's over, May. Really over. Judge Hamilton cleared his throat. There's one more matter. Ms. Hollister, I understand you wish to dissolve your marriage to Samuel Vernon. Yes. May's response was immediate and firm. Given the circumstances, criminal conviction, documented abuse, and so forth, I've taken the liberty of preparing dissolution papers. He offered a third document. Sign where indicated, and you'll be legally free of any connection to Vernon. The name Hollister will be yours again, officially. May's hands trembled slightly as she took the paper. Freedom, rendered in legal prose and official seals. She signed without hesitation, feeling the weight of Vernon's claim falling away with each stroke of the pen. It's done, Judge Hamilton declared, countersigning as witness. Congratulations, Miss Hollister. You are your own woman again. The simple statement brought unexpected tears to May's eyes. Her own woman. After years of subjugation, the concept seemed almost foreign. What happens to Vernon? Jed asked, his voice hard. Trial set for next month in Cheyenne, Cahill answered. Given the evidence and the federal charges, outcome's not really in doubt. He'll hang? May's question was barely audible. The marshal nodded. Justice will be served. The visitors departed soon after, leaving behind their life-altering documents and the promise of further communications as legal matters progressed. Cooper and Abigail tactfully withdrew to the barn, ostensibly to unload supplies from the wagon. Left alone once more, May and Jed sat in silence, each absorbing the implications of the morning's revelations. $15,000, Jed finally commented. That's a fortune. Blood money, May replied softly. Still spends the same. He glanced at her. You could go anywhere, do anything. You keep saying that because it's true. May set the dissolution papers aside. What about you? Your name's cleared, pension restored. What will you do? Jed stared out at the mountains, his expression unreadable. Been thinking about that. This country's changing fast. Won't be long before places like this are all settled, tamed. And that bothers you? Don't know anything else. He shifted, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his healing wound. Thought maybe I'd head further west. Oregon maybe, or California. Find a piece of land where the mountains meet the ocean. May felt a hollow sensation spreading through her chest. Sounds lonely. Been lonely a long time, Jed replied quietly. Got used to it. And if you didn't have to be? The words escaped before May could consider their implications. Jed turned to her, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. May. The door opened as Abigail returned, her timing impeccable in its awkwardness. She paused, sensing the tension. I can come back later. No, it's fine, Jed said, struggling to rise. Think I'll rest a while. Been up too long. May watched him retreat into the cabin, frustration and uncertainty warring within her. Abigail took the seat Jed had vacated, her expression sympathetic. I interrupted something, she observed. Nothing that can't wait, May replied, though she wasn't entirely convinced of that. Abigail studied her sister's face. You care for him. It wasn't a question, but May answered anyway. Yes. Have you told him? Not in so many words. Men can be remarkably dense about these things, Abigail noted dryly. Sometimes the words are necessary. May sighed, gathering the legal papers scattered across her lap. It's complicated, Abby. Life usually is. Abigail's tone softened. But after everything we've survived, I think we've earned the right to pursue happiness, however complicated it might be. May leaned against her sister's shoulder, drawing comfort from the familiar contact. When did you get so wise? Always was, Abigail replied with a small smile. You were just too busy being stubborn to notice. 3 days later, Marcus announced that Jed was strong enough to travel. The news should have been cause for celebration, but it landed among them with the weight of an ultimatum. Time was running out for unspoken words and unmade decisions. That evening, Cooper proposed a small gathering to mark their collective survival and imminent parting. Jackson arrived with a bottle of good whiskey, while Marcus contributed a haunch of venison for the stew pot. The atmosphere was festive on the surface, but undercurrents of melancholy rippled beneath the laughter and conversation. To unlikely alliances, Cooper toasted, raising his glass, and overdue justice. They drank to that, and to friendship forged in adversity, and to new beginnings. As the evening progressed, talk turned to future plans. I'm staying, Cooper announced. Silver Creek needs a blacksmith, and my forge is finally showing a profit. School boards approved my application, Abigail added. Classes start next month in the old assayer's office. Cooper's helping renovate it. The glance that passed between them spoke of possibilities beyond professional collaboration. May filed the observation away for later consideration. I'm heading back to my ranch, Jackson rumbled. Got cattle that need tending. And I've been offered a deputy marshal position, Marcus said. Cahill wants someone who knows the territory. All eyes turned to Jed, who had remained largely silent throughout the meal. He shifted uncomfortably under their collective gaze. West, he said simply. When I'm able. Alone? Cooper pressed, ignoring May's warning look. Jed's eyes flickered briefly to May, then away. Expect so. An awkward silence descended, broken only when Abigail tactfully changed the subject. The evening wound down shortly thereafter, with Jackson and Marcus departing with handshakes and promises to visit before any permanent leave-takings occurred. May helped Abigail clear the dishes, her thoughts circling like hawks over carrion. The night air called to her, promising clarity she couldn't find within the cabin's close confines. I'm going for a walk, she announced, reaching for her shawl. Cooper and Abigail exchanged knowing glances. Take your time, Abigail replied. We'll finish up here. The night embraced May as she stepped outside, cool and clear after days of lingering clouds. Stars carpeted the sky in impossible profusion, their light casting subtle shadows across the yard. She followed the path to Cooper's small corral, where the horses dozed standing up, occasionally nickering softly in their dreams. She wasn't entirely surprised when footsteps approached from behind. She'd left the door open, literally and figuratively. Shouldn't be out in the cold, Jed said, his breath fogging in the night air. Needed to think. May didn't turn. He moved to stand beside her, his presence both comforting and unsettling. About what? The future. Choices. She glanced at his profile, silver in the starlight. Things left unsaid. Jed's hands tightened on the corral fence. May, you're leaving. The words held no accusation, merely acknowledgement of fact. Yes. When? Soon as I'm strong enough. Week, maybe less. May nodded, absorbing this. Where will you go, really? Told you, west. That's a direction, not a destination. A small smile touched his lips. Never been much for planning, just follow the horizon until something feels right. Sounds lonely, she repeated her observation from days earlier. This time Jed didn't deflect. It is. It doesn't have to be. May turned to face him fully. Jed, don't. His voice was soft but urgent. Please, May, don't make this harder. Make what harder? Leaving? Running away? His jaw tightened. Not running, moving forward. Alone, always alone. May's frustration bubbled over. Why, Jed, what are you so afraid of? Afraid? He laughed, a harsh sound in the quiet night. I've buried everyone I ever loved, May. Wife, child, friends. Lost everything a man can lose and still draw breath. So that's it? You'll never risk caring again? It's not about risk, Jed replied, voice dropping. It's about what I deserve. The simple declaration silenced May momentarily. She studied his face, seeing beyond the hardened exterior to the profound guilt beneath. You think you deserve to be alone, she said slowly, as punishment for failing to save them. Jed looked away. You don't understand. I understand guilt, Jed, and shame and the belief that you don't deserve happiness. May stepped closer. Vernon made me feel that way for years, made me believe I deserved every blow, every cruelty. That was different. You were a victim. And you weren't? Vernon betrayed you just as he betrayed me. Different methods, same result. May touched his arm gently. You've spent years punishing yourself for things beyond your control. I should have seen through him, should have protected my men. And I should have left Vernon after the first beating, should have taken Abigail and run. May's hand moved to his cheek, turning his face toward hers. We can destroy ourselves with should-haves, Jed, or we can choose to live now in this moment with the chance we've been given. Jed's eyes, dark with conflict, searched hers. What chance is that? To stop being alone, both of us. The silence that followed seemed to stretch into infinity. May could feel Jed's internal struggle, the war between longing and fear, hope and habit. I'm not the man you think I am, he finally said, his voice rough with emotion. Not a hero. I never wanted a hero. May's response was immediate. I wanted a man who sees me as I am and stands beside me anyway. Someone who understands darkness, but still believes in light. Jed's hand covered hers where it rested against his cheek. I'm broken, May. So am I, she whispered. Maybe we can mend each other. Something shifted in his expression. A softening, a surrender. His free hand moved to her waist, drawing her closer. I don't know how to do this anymore, he confessed. Been alone so long. We'll learn together. May leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. Day by day. Jed's arms encircled her fully then, his embrace careful of his healing wound, but unmistakably possessive. May felt something unlock within her, a door long barred finally swinging open. When his lips found hers, tentative at first, then with growing confidence, the last fragments of Vernon's shadow fell away. This was healing of a different kind, not the mending of flesh, but the restoration of something deeper, more essential. They remained entwined beneath the stars, two damaged souls finding in each other not completion, but complement, the possibility of wholeness neither could achieve alone. The trial of Samuel Vernon, alias Vernon Pike, began on a crisp November morning in Cheyenne. May and Jed attended together, their clasped hands drawing curious glances from spectators unaware of their shared history with the defendant. Vernon's appearance shocked May. 2 months in custody had transformed the powerful rancher into a diminished figure, his expensive tailoring replaced by prison garb, his commanding presence reduced to furtive glances and nervous tics. The proceedings were mercifully brief. The evidence, Vernon's ledgers, witness testimonies, Abigail's meticulous documentation, formed an insurmountable case. Even Vernon's expensive lawyer seemed resigned to defeat, his defenses perfunctory and unconvincing. On the trial's third day, Vernon himself took the stand. His testimony began as a study in arrogance, portraying himself as a businessman caught in circumstances beyond his control. But under the prosecutor's relentless questioning, his facade crumbled. Did you or did you not sell military intelligence to Confederate forces during the Battle of Antietam? The prosecutor demanded. Vernon's eyes darted to Jed in the gallery. I did what was necessary to survive. Answer the question, Mr. Vernon. Yes. The admission seemed to deflate him further. Yes, I did. And did you frame Sergeant Jedediah Lawson for your crimes? Another glance at Jed, this one laced with something like regret. Yes. And did you, over a period of 3 years, launder money for the Blake brothers gang, financing their train robberies and other criminal enterprises? Yes. Musha, by the time Vernon stepped down, he appeared utterly defeated. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours before returning with their verdict, guilty on all counts. Judge Hamilton's sentence came as no surprise. Samuel Vernon, this court finds your crimes against both the United States government and the citizens of Wyoming Territory to be of the most serious nature. You are hereby sentenced to hang by the neck until dead, sentenced to be carried out 2 weeks from today. May felt a complex surge of emotions as Vernon was led away. Relief, vindication, but also a hollow sadness for the waste of a life that might have been lived differently. You all right? Jed asked quietly as they left the courthouse. Yes, May took a deep breath of the cold air. It's finally over. Not quite. Jed's expression was somber. There's the execution. I won't attend that, May decided. I've seen enough death. They walked in silence through Cheyenne's bustling streets, each absorbed in private reflections. Their hotel stood at the quieter end of town, a modest establishment that nonetheless represented luxury compared to Cooper's cabin. In their room, May moved to the window, watching twilight settle over the territorial capital. Jed came up behind her, arms encircling her waist. What are you thinking? He asked, his breath warm against her hair. About choices. Vernon's, mine, yours. She turned within his embrace. About the land claim. Judge Hamilton had officially awarded May 200 acres of the original Pike homestead, land untainted by Vernon's criminal activities. The property lay fallow now, awaiting decisions that would shape its future. What about it? Jed's tone was carefully neutral. I'm keeping it. Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment, perhaps. I understand. It's good land. I want to build something there, May continued. Not a cattle ranch. Something different. A place for women with nowhere else to go. Women like I was. Understanding dawned on Jed's face. A refuge. Yes, Abigail's already talking about expanding the school to include adult education, teaching skills, independence, and Racine. May searched his expression. What do you think? I think it's a fine idea, Jed replied sincerely. You'd be good at it. May took a steadying breath. I'd need help, though. 200 acres is a lot for one person to manage. A cautious hope appeared in Jed's eyes. What kind of help? Someone who knows the land, who can build things, mend fences. Someone patient and kind, who understands what it means to need sanctuary. May's fingers traced the line of his jaw. Someone I trust with my heart. May, Jed's voice was rough with emotion. Are you asking me to stay? I'm asking you to build something with me. Her gaze held his, unwavering. Not just a refuge for others, but a home for us, if that's what you want. The silence that followed was brief, but weighted with significance. Then Jed's arms tightened around her, his answer given in the fierce tenderness of his embrace. Yes, he murmured against her lips. That's what I want. Spring came early to Wyoming that year, green tendrils of new life pushing through soil still bearing the scars of winter. On the land that had once been Vernon Pike's domain of fear, transformation was underway. The old ranch house had been expanded, Additional rooms constructed under Jed's patient direction. What had been a monument to one man's cruelty was becoming a sanctuary for healing and growth. The first residents had arrived in late March, a young mother with two small children fleeing an abusive husband in Laramie, a widow whose in-laws had seized her property upon her husband's death, an elderly woman whose son had abandoned her when gold fever struck. May welcomed them all, her own experiences informing the mixture of practical assistance and dignified respect she offered. Abigail divided her time between their school in Silver Creek and adult education at what they now called Hollister House, teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic to women who'd been denied such basics. On a warm April afternoon, May stood on the porch, watching Jed work with Jackson and two of the refuge residents to complete a new barn. His movements were fluid again, the winter months having restored his strength and healed his wounds, the physical ones at least. The deeper injuries, like May's own, would always remain part of them, but no longer define them. "Penny for your thoughts," Abigail said, joining her sister on the porch. May smiled, just appreciating the view. Abigail followed her gaze to where Jed had removed his shirt in the spring heat, muscles working as he lifted a beam into place. "Can't say I blame you." And they laughed together, a sound that would have been unimaginable in this place a year earlier. "Cooper's coming for supper," Abigail mentioned, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Said he has something important to discuss." "Does he now?" May raised an eyebrow. "Anything I should know about?" "Maybe." Abigail's smile was secretive but radiant. "If things go as I hope." May hugged her sister impulsively. "I'm happy for you, Abby, truly." "And I for you." Abigail nodded toward Jed. "You were right to believe in second chances." "We all deserve them," May replied softly, "even when we don't believe it ourselves." The sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Marcus Reeves rode up the lane, accompanied by a smartly dressed woman May didn't recognize. "Ladies," Marcus called, tipping his hat as he dismounted. "Hope we're not intruding." "Never," May assured him, descending the porch steps to greet the visitors. "What brings our illustrious deputy marshal to Hollister House?" "Official business?" "Partly." Marcus helped his companion dismount. "May Hollister, meet Rebecca Carter. She's with the Women's Temperance Union out of Denver." The woman extended a gloved hand. "Ms. Hollister, I've heard remarkable things about your establishment here." May accepted the handshake, curiosity piqued. "All good, I hope." "Extraordinarily so," and Rebecca Carter's smile was warm and genuine. "Your reputation has spread. I'm here to discuss potential funding from our organization for similar refuges throughout the territory." "Funding?" May exchanged surprised glances with Abigail. "The union has expanded its mission beyond temperance," Rebecca explained. "We're increasingly concerned with women's welfare more broadly. What you've created here aligns perfectly with our goals." Jed approached, wiping his hands on a cloth. May made introductions, pride evident in her voice as she explained their relationship. "Mr. Lawson," Rebecca acknowledged, "your contribution to this endeavor speaks well of you." "Ms. Hollister's the visionary," Jed replied modestly. "I just provide the labor." "And so much more," May added, her hand finding his. They showed the visitors around the property, explaining their approach and future plans. Rebecca took copious notes, her questions incisive but respectful. By the time they returned to the house for refreshments, a collaborative relationship was clearly forming. "I'll recommend initial funding of $5,000, Rebecca announced as they settled in the parlor, "with potential for ongoing support based on results." May's breath caught. "That's extraordinarily generous." "It's investment in necessary change," Rebecca corrected. "What you're doing here isn't charity, it's justice. These women deserve the chance to rebuild their lives." "Just as you did," Marcus added, his gaze warm with admiration. As discussion turned to practicalities, May found herself momentarily overwhelmed by the distance traveled since that desperate day hanging in Vernon's stable. From victim to survivor to advocate, a journey she couldn't have imagined then, much less completed alone. Her eyes met Jed's across the room, finding in his steady gaze the same wonder at life's unexpected turns. His slight smile conveyed everything words couldn't: pride, love, the quiet satisfaction of purpose found after years of aimless wandering. Later, after their guests had departed with promises of future collaboration, May and Jed walked along the creek that bordered the property. The setting sun painted the landscape in hues of amber and gold, the harsh Wyoming terrain softened by spring's gentle touch. $5,000, Jed marveled, shaking his head. Could help a lot of women with that. It could, May agreed. Might even be able to expand. Buy neighboring land if it comes available. Jackson mentioned the Henderson place might be for sale. Old man's moving to California to live with his daughter. May glanced at him. "You've been thinking about this." "Been thinking about a lot of things." Jed stopped walking, turning to face her. "Been thinking it might be time to make things more permanent. Between us." May's heart quickened. What kind of permanent? Instead of answering directly, Jed reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that caught the fading sunlight. A ring, simple but beautifully crafted, a band of silver set with a single pearl. "Cooper helped me make it," Jed explained, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his voice. "Had to guess the size." May stared at the ring, then at Jed's face, momentarily speechless. "Understand if it's too soon," he continued when she didn't respond. "Or if you'd rather not be tied to anyone again, after Vernon. Just wanted you to know where I stand." May found her voice at last. "Where do you stand, Jed Lawson?" "With you." His answer was simple but profound. "For as long as you'll have me." May extended her left hand, fingers trembling slightly. "Let's see if it fits." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, as though it had been measured precisely rather than estimated. The pearl gleamed softly against her skin, its luster reminiscent of the moon on water. "I'd say that's a sign," May murmured, admiring it. "Is that a yes?" Jed's voice held cautious hope. May's answer came not in words, but in the way she stepped into his embrace, her lips finding his with certainty and promise. When they finally parted, the first stars had appeared in the darkening sky. May stood silently watching the sunset spread across the vast prairie, the last rays of daylight bathing the land that now belonged to her. Not through forced marriage, not as someone else's property, but truly her own. Her. She still occasionally startled awake at dawn, half conscious and imagining herself still in Vernon's house, awaiting his next outburst. But then reality would come into focus. The peaceful room, Jed's steady breathing beside her, and the realization that fear was now just a ghost of the past. Her finger traced lightly over the scar on her shoulder, the P that had faded with time but remained visible. Once it had been a mark of ownership, of humiliation. Now she viewed it as a relic of her journey. Strangely, she didn't want it to disappear completely. The scar reminded her of strength forged through pain, of a resilience she never knew she possessed. Abigail always said I was stronger than I thought," she whispered to herself. "I didn't believe her for so many years." May recalled the weak, frightened woman she had once been, always bowing her head, always trying to dissolve into shadows, always believing she wasn't worth saving. Then she thought of the woman who had gone back into the tiger's den to save Jed, who had forced Vernon to face justice, who was building a sanctuary for those who needed it. They seemed like two entirely different people, yet they were both her. The seed of that courage had always existed, needing only fertile soil, Jed's faith, Abigail's love, and finally belief in herself. The women at Hollister House often asked her how she found strength after everything she'd endured. May never had an easy answer. How could she explain that freedom wasn't a single explosive moment of liberation, but a series of small decisions, one step at a time, each step away from Vernon's control, each affirmation of her own worth, each realization that she deserved love and happiness. The sunset faded, but May didn't mourn its passing. Darkness no longer frightened her as it once had. Like the moon that would rise again, like the stars that would appear in the sky, she knew she would face tomorrow with her newfound courage. Not because she was fearless, she still felt fear sometimes, but because she had learned to live with that fear and not let it define her. "Ready to go home?" Jed asked, coming to stand beside her with the steady hand and gentle eyes she had come to know so well. May smiled, taking his hand. Beneath her fingers, the silver ring gleamed in the light of the rising new moon. No longer shackles, only promises. No longer possession, only partnership. May looked toward the house, where warm light spilled from the windows, where familiar laughter and voices echoed. Once, home had been the place she feared most. Now it was the safest place she knew in the world. I used to dream of escape, May confessed, her head resting against Jed's chest. During those years with Vernon, I'd imagine running away, finding somewhere to start fresh. And now? She looked up at him, at the face that had become as necessary to her as air. Now I dream of building, of growing something that matters. Her fingers intertwined with his. With you beside me. Jed's arms tightened around her. No more running, he agreed, for either of us. They walked back toward the house, where lamplight spilled from windows in golden rectangles across the yard. Inside, voices and laughter could be heard. Abigail and Cooper, no doubt, along with the women and children who had found sanctuary under their roof. May paused at the gate, drinking in the scene. Not so long ago, she had been hanging upside down in a stable, her life measured in the hours before dehydration claimed her. Now she stood on land that was truly hers, surrounded by a community she had helped create, loved by a man who saw her strength rather than her scars. Welcome home, Jed said softly, understanding her thoughts without need for explanation. May smiled, the last shadows of her past finally receding before the light of the present. Yes, she agreed, stepping through the gate at his side. Home.